It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? We spend our entire lives experiencing the world through this lens, and yet we rarely pause to actually examine the lens itself. I'm talking about attention. You know, that fundamental capacity that shapes how we perceive, learn, interact with everything around us.
It's huge.
From grasping a new idea to, I don't know, truly connecting in a conversation, focus is just the essential ingredient.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, as you say, is that this human quest to understand attention, its power, its fragility, well, it spans across all ages, cultures, right through history. It's not new.
Right. People have always been curious about this.
They have. It's a concept that has drawn the curiosity of thinkers, researchers, you name it, across countless disciplines. So for this deep dive, we've gathered insights from psychology, neuroscience, how our attention evolves as we grow, the subtle but powerful influence of culture, historical viewpoints, philosophy, even AI, actually.
And AI too. Okay.
Yeah.
Our mission is to really kind of get under the skin of what attention truly is. Okay, so on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward, right? We all know what it feels like to be focused.
Sure.
And what it's like when our minds wander off. But the deeper you go, the more you realize it's this incredibly intricate process. And it has some inherent limitations.
Oh, definitely. We can only truly focus on a sliver of what's out there. You know? We're constantly making these split-second decisions about where to direct our mental energy.
And there's that bottleneck thing, right? How much we can actually process.
Precisely. That attentional bottleneck is a powerful concept. The very act of paying attention to one thing is, at the same time, an act of ignoring countless others.
Right. You choose one, you lose others.
Exactly. This constant sifting and prioritizing is crucial for navigating the daily, deluge of sensory information. And that bottleneck highlights that our conscious processing capacity is finite. Think of it like a narrow passage.
Okay.
No matter how much information is coming in, only a limited amount can actually squeeze through into our conscious awareness at any one time.
So let's really get into the nuts and bolts then. Let's talk the science of focus. Psychologically speaking, what are the different ways we experience this thing we call attention? It's not just one uniform ability, is it?
No, not at all. Psychology breaks it down into several key types. Each one has its own distinct characteristics, its own role.
Like what?
Well, we have sustained attention. That's the ability to stick with a task over time, like, say, reading a long article.
Okay, sticking with it.
Then there's selective attention. That's our skill in zeroing in on what's important while filtering out distractions. Trying to hear one voice in a noisy room, that's a classic example.
Right, the cocktail party effect.
Exactly. Then there's divided attention. That's what we try to engage when we do multiple things at once, like listening to music while cooking.
Try being the operative word there.
Well, yeah. It often comes with a cost of performance on, both tasks. And finally, there's executive attention. This covers those higher-level mental skills that let us plan, organize, manage our time, monitor our progress.
The manager.
Kind of. The conductor of our cognitive orchestra, if you will.
I like that. It really does sound like a suite of different mental tools we can deploy. And when we talk about this historical understanding, you mentioned William James. What was his key contribution?
James's definition, back in the late 1800s, is still remarkably insightful today. He described attention as the taking possession by the mind, in clear and vivid form, of one out of what seems several simultaneously possible objects or trains of thought.
Taking possession. I like that. Active.
That's the crucial part. The emphasis on possession and selection. It's not passive, like just receiving information. It's an active seizing and prioritizing of certain mental content over others.
Okay, so that's the psychological framework. But what's the biological story? What's actually happening in our brains when we're focused?
Neurologically, yeah, it's orchestrated by this fascinating interplay of brain regions and neurochemicals. We can broadly distinguish between voluntary and involuntary attention.
Okay, voluntary and involuntary.
Right. So when you consciously decide to focus on something that's voluntary or endogenous attention, it heavily engages the prefrontal cortex and the parietal cortices.
The front and side bits, roughly.
Roughly, yeah. Think of the prefrontal cortex as the brain's CEO, responsible for those executive functions we mentioned, planning, decision-making.
Got it.
And the parietal cortex helps to direct our focus, especially in space, like figuring out where to look or listen.
So when I'm deliberately trying to follow your explanation right now, those are the areas lighting up.
Precisely those areas, working hard. Now, when something unexpected grabs your attention, a sudden loud noise,
Maybe like a car horn.
Right. That's involuntary or exogenous attention at work.
Yeah.
This involves a different network, mainly in the right hemisphere, called the ventral frontoparietal network.
Okay, another network.
Its job is to quickly detect and orient us towards new or potentially important things happening outside us, almost like a reflex.
So driving, and a sudden brake light flashes ahead. That immediate grab of your focus.
That's it, exactly. That's this network kicking in, prioritizing potential threats or important changes.
So one's the deliberate spotlight, the other's like a sudden flashbulb going off. How do they work together? They must communicate.
Oh, they're not independent at all. They constantly interact to create a flexible attentional system.
Yeah.
There's a small but mighty region in the brainstem called the locus coeruleus.
Locus coeruleus. Okay.
It plays a key role in modulating this interaction by releasing the neurotransmitter norepinephrine.
Norepinephrine. Right. Adrenaline related.
Related, yeah. Think of norepinephrine as like a dial that tunes the overall alertness or gain of your brain. Too low, and the signal your focus is weak and fuzzy. Just right, and it's clear and strong. It allows both voluntary and involuntary attention to function optimally.
That's a great way to visualize it, like tuning a radio. And I've heard about brain waves changing too, alpha and gamma.
Absolutely. Different brainwave frequencies give us insights into our attentional state. Alpha oscillations, which are slower brainwaves, tend to be dominant when we're more relaxed, less focused. They're thought to help suppress irrelevant sensory input, actually.
So they quiet things down.
Kind of. And on the other hand, gamma synchrony that involves faster brainwave activity, coordinated across different brain regions, tends to increase when we're deeply engaged, processing information in a focused way.
Faster ways for focus.
Generally, yes. The dynamic interplay, the balance between these different frequencies, reflects the constant shifting and tuning of our attentional resources.
Wow. So it's really not just about trying harder to concentrate. There's this whole biological ballet happening underneath.
That's a perfect way to put it.
And back to that voluntary and involuntary interplay, can you give another real-world example of how they cooperate?
Sure. Imagine you're in a busy coffee shop, trying to have a conversation with a friend. That's your voluntary attention at work, right? Focusing on their voice, filtering out the background chatter.
Yeah, standard coffee shop scenario. But suddenly, you hear someone nearby mention your name.
Ears prick up immediately.
Exactly. That's your involuntary attention kicking in. It's a salient stimulus, something personally relevant, grabbing your focus just for a moment.
Right.
This immediate shift lets you quickly assess if that information is actually relevant to you before you consciously decide whether to redirect your full attention or go back to your friend.
So it's this constant dance between our goals, what we want to focus on, and what the environment throws at us. Makes our attention really adaptive.
That's the key. It's adaptive.
Okay, that paints a very clear picture. So when we talk about someone having good concentration, it's not just a single skill. It's this well-coordinated set of processes with a biological foundation that's influenced by everything from our genes to our stress levels and, how much sleep we got last night.
Precisely. It's a multifaceted cognitive ability with deep biological roots. No question. Okay, let's shift gears. Let's look at a journey through life. How does this ability to focus and pay attention change as we go through different stages? Does it develop over time?
Oh, absolutely. Our attentional capacities undergo a really remarkable evolution throughout our lives. In infancy, for example, attention is largely reflexive. It's driven by immediate stimuli, things that are bright or loud or new. Sustained focus is very, very brief.
Makes sense for a baby, grabbing whatever catches their eye.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then, as children develop, particularly as the prefrontal cortex matures, that CEO part of the brain we talked about,
Right.
their ability to sustain attention gradually increases. And this growth is a key element in their learning and overall cognitive development.
And there are some typical attention spans we see at different ages, right? Ballpark figures.
Yeah, as a general rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And these are just averages, mind you. A 2-year-old might have a focused attention span of around, say, 4 to 6 minutes on an activity they choose.
4 to 6 minutes, okay.
By the time a child is 10, their sustained attention span can typically range from maybe 20 to 30 minutes.
Quite a jump.
It is. Adolescence brings further refinement. Many teenagers can concentrate for 30 minutes to an hour, maybe even longer, especially on tasks they find genuinely engaging.
Interest becomes key.
Hugely important. Peak attention span generally occurs in early adulthood. Individuals then can often maintain focus for several hours at a time on demanding tasks.
Okay, peak adult focus. And then, does it decline?
Well, As we move into older adulthood, there can sometimes be a gradual decline in the ability to sustain focus and maybe an increased susceptibility to distractions. But it varies hugely between individuals.
Right. Not inevitable, but possible. So what are the key factors influencing our attention span at these different points in life, apart from just age and brain development?
Well, interest, as you mentioned, is a powerful motivator at any age. We naturally pay more attention to things we find engaging or enjoyable.
Sure.
For younger children, factors like fatigue, hunger, being in an overly stimulating environment, too much noise, too much going on, can significantly impact their ability to focus.
Basic needs matter.
Absolutely. Temperament also plays a role. Some individuals just seem naturally more inclined towards focused engagement than others. And then, of course, we have the huge growing influence of technology.
Oh, yes. Screen time, social media, the digital world, a constant source of potential distraction.
Exactly. The pervasive nature of digital media, especially for younger generations growing up with it, has sparked concerns about its potential contribution to shorter attention spans and increased distractibility.
Is that actually proven? That tech shortens attention spans?
It's complex. The rapid-fire nature of a lot of online content might be training our brains towards shorter bursts of attention, making sustained focus harder. But research is ongoing, and it's hard to isolate the cause. It's also crucial to remember that factors like stress and anxiety can negatively affect attention span at any age.
Right. Stress fogs the brain.
Totally. It disrupts our ability to concentrate, regardless of our developmental stage or tech habits.
So it's this ongoing interplay between our biological development, our individual states like interest or stress, our environment, including the digital one, and the long-term impact of our increasingly digital lives on our fundamental ability to focus is still a pretty big question mark.
Absolutely. It's a major area of active research. And cultivating mindful awareness of our own attention in this digital age is probably more important than ever.
Okay. Now let's switch perspective again and consider woven into culture. How does our cultural background actually shape the way we direct our attention to the world around us? Is that really a thing?
Oh, it seems to be. This is a fascinating area of study, suggesting that there can be noticeable differences in attentional styles across cultures. One key distinction often highlighted is between holistic and analytic thinking patterns.
Holistic versus analytic. Okay, what's the difference there?
So individuals from many East Asian cultural backgrounds, China, Japan, Korea, for example, often tend to exhibit a more holistic attentional style.
Holistic meaning?
Meaning they typically focus more on the broader context. They pay attention to the relationships between different elements within a scene or a situation. They're more inclined to see the interconnectedness, the whole picture.
Okay, seeing the whole forest?
Kind of. Conversely, people from many Western cultures, North America, Western Europe, often display a more analytic style. Here, the primary focus tends to be on individual objects or figures and their specific attributes, often analyzing them sort of in isolation from their surrounding context.
So focusing on the individual tree, maybe its specific type or features?
That's an excellent analogy, yeah. And these different attentional styles often seem linked to core cultural values.
How so?
Well, collectivist cultures, which tend to emphasize group harmony, interdependence, the importance of social context, they often align with holistic thinking and a greater sensitivity to contextual cues.
Okay, focus on the group, focus on the context.
Right. In contrast, individualistic cultures, which tend to prioritize personal autonomy, individual achievement, they're often associated more with analytic thinking and an object-oriented focus.
Focus on the individual, focus on the object itself. That connection between cultural values and cognitive styles is really interesting. But are these like hard and fast rules? Is everyone from a Western culture guaranteed to be an analytic thinker?
Oh, no, not at all. These are broad tendencies, general patterns observed in studies. There's significant individual variation within any cultural group.
Right.
And what's particularly interesting is that some research suggests that certain fundamental aspects of attention might actually be universal.
Like what?
For instance, one study looked at people from different cultures viewing advertisements. They found there weren't significant differences in what initially captured their attention, the basic visual grabbing power.
Really? That's quite surprising. I'd have thought ads would be culturally tuned.
Well, the initial grab might be similar. It suggests that for certain types of direct, salient stimuli, our basic attentional mechanisms might operate pretty similarly across cultures. The influence of culture on attention might become more pronounced in more complex real-world scenarios that require deeper processing, interpretation, understanding social cues, that sort of thing.
Ah, okay. So culture might have a bigger impact on how we interpret, say, a complex social interaction rather than how we initially react to a bright flashing sign. That's a subtle but important distinction.
Exactly. The interplay between culture and attention seems to be more nuanced than simple generalizations would suggest. It's not either.
Got it. Let's journey back in time now with echoes through time. When did thinkers first start really grappling with this concept of attention? How has our understanding evolved? It wasn't always studied scientifically, right?
Right. The exploration of attention has a rich history, long before psychology became a formal discipline. As early as the 17th century, you had philosophers like Nicolas Malebranche recognizing attention as fundamental to how we organize our thoughts and make sense of things.
17th century, wow.
Yeah. Around the same time, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the mathematician and philosopher, introduced this concept of apperception.
Apperception.
Kind of the process by which new experiences become consciously clear, enter our awareness. And he considered attention to be a crucial element in that process, making things clear in the mind.
So even centuries ago, they understood its central role in our mental lives, even without brain scans.
Absolutely. Then, fast forward to the late 19th century, psychology starts taking shape as a science, and attention becomes the central topic of investigation. Wilhelm Wundt, often called the father of experimental psychology.
Wundt.
He viewed attention as an interactivity, something that determined the clarity of our conscious awareness. He even distinguished between just passively perceiving something and actively perceiving it through focused attention.
Sounds like they were laying the groundwork for our modern understanding of consciousness itself.
They really were. Following Wundt, you had William James, whose definition we talked about earlier, further emphasizing that selective nature of attention, choosing what to focus on.
Right, the taking possession.
Exactly. And the late 19th, early 20th centuries saw the development of actual experimental approaches to studying attention. Researchers like Hermann von Helmholtz devised clever methods to investigate visual attention, for example.
Talk about early pioneers in cognitive science. But I know psychology went through some shifts. What happened to studying attention during the behaviorist era? Didn't they focus only on observable stuff?
That's a key point, yeah. In the first half of the 20th century, behaviorism became dominant, especially in America. And they largely focused on observable behaviors, stimulus, response, and kind of downplayed or ignored internal mental states like attention. It wasn't seen as scientifically rigorous enough to study.
So attention research took a back seat for a while.
It did. But interest reemerged strongly in the mid-20th century, partly driven by the rise of information theory and cognitive science, and also practical demands during World War II. Understanding human performance in complex tasks like radar operation became critical.
Ah, real world needs push the science.
Exactly. This led to the development of models like Donald Broadbent's famous filter theory in the 1950s. He used that analogy of a bottleneck to explain how attention limits the amount of information we can consciously process.
The bottleneck returns. So it went from a philosophical concept to a critical element in understanding human information processing. And you mentioned earlier that concerns about technology's impact on attention aren't exactly new.
It's quite remarkable, actually. As early as 1900, with the emergence of new technologies like the kinetoscope and those early personal motion picture viewers.
Right, peep shows almost.
Kind of. People were already expressing anxieties back then about their potential to shorten attention spans and make people distractible.
No way, in 1900, about kinetoscopes.
Yep. This historical perspective is really valuable, I think. It provides context for our current discussions about smartphones, social media, the internet. It seems that with each significant technological shift, we've grappled with concerns about its effects on our minds, including our ability to focus.
That's almost reassuring in a weird way.
It is.
Highlights that this isn't just a unique modern-day panic. It's a recurring human concern as our technological landscape evolves.
Precisely. It underscores our enduring interest, maybe anxiety, about how external factors might be shaping our internal mental world.
Okay, now let's delve into attention's myriad influence. It's clear attention isn't just one isolated cognitive function. It seems to ripple out, affecting so many different aspects of our lives. Let's start with the subjectivity of time. How does where we direct our attention actually alter our perception of time passing?
Yeah, this is a fascinating one. Our experience of time isn't like a fixed clock ticking away objectively. It's actually quite fluid, quite malleable, and heavily influenced by how we allocate our attention.
So time flies when you're having fun is actually real. scientifically.
Pretty much. When we're deeply engaged in an activity, our attention is fully absorbed by the task itself, rather than by tracking the passage of time. In those situations, we often experience time as speeding up, flying by. Think of being engrossed in a captivating book, a great movie, or maybe a challenging puzzle.
Oh, I know that feeling well. Hours can just vanish without you even noticing.
Exactly. That's your attention being directed away from time itself. Conversely, when we are consciously monitoring time, maybe waiting for something important or just bored, our judgment of duration tends to be more accurate or even feel slower.
Like watching a pot that never boils.
Precisely. And interestingly, some research even suggests that where we focus our spatial attention, like whether we're looking more to the left or right, can subtly influence our perception of duration.
Wait, seriously, just looking left or right can change how long something feels. That's mind-boggling.
It is pretty wild. And one compelling model that helps explain some of this is the attentional gate theory of time perception.
Attentional gate, okay.
This theory proposes that our internal sense of time relies on accumulating neural clock pulses, like an internal pacemaker. Attention acts like a gate, controlling how many of these pulses are allowed into our conscious awareness.
Yep.
When we're paying more attention to time itself, the gate is wider. More pulses get registered, and we perceive time as passing more slowly, or at least more accurately. But when our attention is directed elsewhere, absorbed in that book, say, the gate narrows. Fewer pulses get through, and we tend to underestimate the amount of time that has elapsed.
Time flies.
Time flies. So being in that state of flow, that deep immersion, isn't just about heightened productivity. It's fundamentally altering our subjective experience of time itself.
Wow. And that has implications not just for work, but for how we experience leisure, our relationships, our whole lives, really.
Absolutely. That deep immersion and the resulting modulation of time perception just underscore how intricately our internal cognitive processes, like attention, are linked to our engagement with the world.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly and consider shaping the narrative. How does what we pay attention to now, in the present, influence our understanding of the past, of history?
Well, history isn't simply a collection of objective facts just lying there waiting to be discovered. It's actively shaped, constructed even, by what we choose to focus on and remember in the present.
Oh, so.
Think about the very concept of historical significance. We, in our current context, decide which events, which individuals, which narratives from the past are deemed important enough to be remembered, studied, passed down.
Right. We choose what goes in the history books.
Exactly. And that selection process is influenced by all sorts of factors. The perceived novelty of an event, its relevance to our present-day concerns, how it's been remembered and interpreted over time, its perceived long-term impact. It's all viewed through a present-day lens.
So the stories we tell ourselves about the past are filtered through what we care about now.
Precisely. And historical analysis itself is an inherently interpretive act. Historians, like all of us, bring their own perspectives, their own biases, their own frameworks to their work. This inevitably influences what aspects of the past they focus on, where they direct their scholarly attention, and how they interpret the available evidence.
Right. Different historians might focus on different aspects of the same event.
Absolutely. This selective attention can lead to the construction of particular historical narratives that emphasize certain themes or perspectives, while potentially marginalizing or overlooking others. It's not necessarily intentional deception, but it's a result of where the focus lies.
It's like shining a spotlight on certain corners of the past while leaving others in relative darkness. And the person holding that spotlight is us, in the present. That's a powerful idea.
It really is. It underscores that our understanding of history isn't some static, fixed entity. It's an ongoing dialogue between the past and the present, constantly being reshaped by our current attentional focus, our current concerns.
Okay. Now let's turn our attention appropriately enough to the blueprint of focus. What about the genetic and biological factors? How much do they contribute to the individual differences we see in how well people can focus?
Our capacity for attention definitely has a significant genetic and biological basis. This is maybe most evident in conditions like attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD.
Right, ADHD.
Which is characterized by persistent difficulties with things like sustained attention, hyperactivity, impulsivity. ADHD has a high degree of heritability.
Meaning it runs in family?
Strongly.
Yeah.
It indicates a strong genetic influence on its development. Many of the genes implicated in ADHD are thought to play roles in brain development and the regulation of neurotransmitter systems, particularly dopamine.
Dopamine. Okay, the reward chemical.
Among other things, yes.
Yeah.
It's crucial for regulating attention and motivation. So there's a clear biological component to these significant attentional differences.
But what about in the general population, people who don't have ADHD? Are there still genetic influences on their attention abilities, say executive function?
Yes, research suggests that genetic variations can also influence aspects of executive attention, those higher-level control functions, even in individuals without an ADHD diagnosis. At a fundamental biological level, as we discussed earlier, attention is regulated by this complex network, the locus coeruleus releasing norepinephrine.
Right.
The prefrontal and parietal cortex is doing the heavy lifting.
Mm.
And other neurotransmitters like dopamine and acetylcholine playing crucial roles. The intricate interplay of all these genetic and neurobiological factors contributes to the wide spectrum of attentional capacities and styles we see across the population.
It really reinforces the idea that our ability to focus isn't solely a matter of willpower or effort, is it? There's a significant underlying biological architecture that shapes our attentional tendencies.
Exactly. Our genetic predispositions and our underlying neurobiology create a framework, a sort of starting point that influences how we attend to the world. Environment and experience then build on that, of course.
Right. Nature and nurture. Okay, let's delve into the philosophical realm with mind and meaning. How have philosophers tackled attention and its link to consciousness?
Philosophers have long recognized this deep interconnectedness between attention and consciousness. We mentioned Leibniz's apperception, earlier attention, as a gateway to conscious awareness.
Right.
And William James's definition also laid crucial groundwork for philosophical discussions about the nature of the mind and selection. Philosophically, attention is often described as the selective directedness of our mental activity. Why this thought and not that one?
Okay.
Various philosophical theories have tried to explain this selectivity, exploring factors like our processing limitations, our conscious capacity or lack thereof to manage multiple streams of thought simultaneously.
And you mentioned the philosopher Simone Weil earlier. She had a particularly unique take.
Yes, Simone Weil, a 20th century philosopher, mystic, social activist, offered this really compelling concept of attention as a form of negative effort.
Negative effort sounds paradoxical.
It does. For Weil, true, deep attention wasn't about actively trying to grasp or control our thoughts or impose our will. It was more about cultivating a state of receptive stillness, suspending our own ego, our preconceptions, to become fully open to the reality of whatever we're attending to, whether it's a math problem, a piece of art, or another person's suffering.
Wow. So letting go to truly see.
Kind of. She even drew a profound link between this kind of receptive attention and ethical behavior. She suggested it's essential for genuine empathy, for truly understanding another person's experience from their perspective.
That's powerful.
It is. And the precise relationship between attention and consciousness itself, well, that remains a hot topic of debate in both philosophy and neuroscience today. Are they distinct but interacting processes, or fundamentally intertwined aspects of the same thing? The jury's still out.
Weil's idea of negative effort is really counterintuitive in our usually strive harder culture. It suggests sometimes the most effective way to focus or to understand is actually to release our active striving. Makes you consider different ways of engaging.
It certainly does. It challenges our conventional understanding of attention as primarily an active exertion of mental will. Sometimes, perhaps, it's about allowing.
Okay, now let's consider the importance of precision and insight. What about fields like physics and mathematics? How critical is focused attention there? Seems obvious, but maybe there are nuances.
Oh, focused attention is absolutely indispensable for success in disciplines like physics and math. These fields often demand meticulous attention to the smallest details, right?
For sure.
They require consistent, sustained effort to build understanding step by step, often dealing with abstract, interconnected concepts. In physics, for instance, you need the ability to translate real-world physical phenomena into precise mathematical language.
Right, the formulas.
And then, crucially, to interpret those mathematical results back into a physical framework. That bridging requires a very specific, highly focused kind of attention.
Connecting the abstract math to the real world.
Exactly. And similarly, in mathematics itself, logical reasoning, problem solving, constructing and understanding proofs, they all rely heavily on sustained concentration and the capacity to follow intricate sequences of steps without making errors.
I can definitely imagine that in a complex physics problem or a long proof, one tiny slip-up in concentration early on could just cascade and lead to a completely wrong final answer.
Absolutely. Attention to detail is paramount. not just for avoiding those costly errors, but also for grasping the often subtle nuances of mathematical theorems or physical principles. It's often in the details that the deeper understanding lies.
Makes sense.
And active learning strategies, things like trying to explain concepts out loud or working through problems collaboratively, can significantly enhance attention and lead to deeper understanding in these demanding fields.
Getting actively involved helps you focus.
Right. And it's important to recognize, too, that while physics relies heavily on mathematical tools, attention in physics also involves something more: the distinct ability to conceptualize physical scenarios, to build a mental model, to intuit how different elements might interact. It's more than just number crunching.
So it's not just the mechanical application of formulas, it's about developing this focused mental picture of how the physical world operates.
Precisely. And that requires a very particular kind of directed and sustained attention. Very demanding.
Okay, let's now turn inward to the inner landscape. How do our internal states, our emotions, our mood, our general well-being, how do they influence our capacity to focus?
Our ability to direct and sustain our attention is deeply, deeply intertwined with our internal emotional landscape and our overall state of mind. It's not separate at all.
Right.
For one thing, attention is closely linked to our level of physiological arousal. We need to be at an optimal level of alertness to focus effectively. Not too sleepy, not too wired.
The sweet spot.
Exactly. But experiencing extremes of arousal, like intense stress or anxiety, can actually impair our attentional abilities. It leads to distractibility, difficulty concentrating, that feeling of mental fog.
Been there.
Haven't we all? Similarly, negative emotional states, just feeling down or upset, along with poor sleep quality, general fatigue, they all significantly diminish our attentional resources. Our focus fuel gets depleted.
Makes sense. Conversely, does feeling good help?
It often does. Cultivating positive emotional states can frequently enhance our focus and cognitive performance. When we feel good, our minds tend to be a bit more open, more flexible, and potentially more focused.
That aligns with common experience. It's almost impossible to concentrate when you're feeling totally overwhelmed or just completely exhausted.
Exactly. And remember, we talked about top-down versus bottom-up attention.
Yeah, voluntary versus involuntary grab.
Right. Well, emotional stimuli, things that are scary or exciting or just personally relevant, have a particularly strong tendency to trigger that bottom-up involuntary attention. They can sometimes even override our conscious intentions, pulling our focus whether we want them to or not.
You can't not look at something shocking.
Pretty much. Furthermore, our state of consciousness fluctuates all the time, right? Along a spectrum from mind-wandering and daydreaming
Guilty.
to being completely absorbed in that state of flow. And each of these states is characterized by different patterns of attentional engagement.
Right. Flow is peak focus.
It is. And the Yerkes-Dodson curve, a classic concept in psychology, illustrates this idea that there's an optimal level of arousal for peak performance on many tasks, including focus, both too little arousal, being sleepy, and too much arousal, being panicked, can be detrimental.
So finding that balance of engagement and alertness, managing our stress and emotions, getting enough sleep, it's all crucial for optimal focus. Our emotions act as powerful signals that can either boost or disrupt our concentration.
Absolutely. Our internal landscape plays a huge dynamic role in shaping where and how we direct our attention moment by moment.
Now let's delve into constructing reality. This sounds intriguing. How do our attentional processes actually contribute to forming and maintaining our belief systems?
Attention plays a really fundamental role here. It shapes how we construct our understanding of the world and, consequently, the beliefs we end up holding. What we choose to focus on directly influences the information we perceive, process, and crucially remember. Over time, this selective attention can strongly reinforce our existing beliefs. It creates this cycle where we become more likely to notice and recall information that aligns with what we already think is true.
So, in a sense, we tend to see what we're already looking for. We filter reality through our beliefs.
To a significant extent, yes. This tendency is very closely related to the well-known phenomenon of confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias, right. Seeking out confirming evidence.
Exactly. We unconsciously seek out, pay more attention to, and give more weight to information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs, while we tend to ignore, dismiss, or quickly forget contradictory evidence.
Even if the contradictory evidence is strong.
Often, yes. This attentional bias can make even inaccurate beliefs remarkably resistant to change. It feels right because everything we notice seems to support it. There's also something called the networks of beliefs theory, which highlights the complex interplay between our individual beliefs, our perceptions of what other people believe, and our understanding of external reality. Our attentional focus plays a crucial role in whether we even notice inconsistencies within these networks.
So if we don't pay attention to the contradiction, we don't question the belief.
Pretty much. Noticing inconsistencies is often the first step towards potentially reevaluating and updating our beliefs. And the more attention we allocate to a particular belief, thinking about it, finding evidence for it, the more central and entrenched it tends to become in our cognitive framework.
It sounds like our attention acts as this powerful gatekeeper, selectively admitting information that supports our current worldview and potentially blocking out challenges to it.
That's a really key insight. And it implies that consciously directing our attention towards diverse sources of information, actively seeking out different perspectives, even ones we disagree with, that can be a valuable strategy for mitigating confirmation bias and fostering a more nuanced, maybe more accurate understanding of the world.
Easier said than done sometimes.
Absolutely. And we also have to remember the social aspect. Our attention to social cues and our desire to maintain consistency with the beliefs of our social groups also significantly influences the beliefs we adopt and maintain. We pay attention to what our peers think.
That makes perfect sense. We often pay very close attention to the beliefs and opinions of those around us, the people we identify with. Now let's widen the lens again and consider the broader individual and collective impacts of our attentional capacities.
Okay, so on an individual level, as we've touched on, our capacity for sustained, focused attention has profound implications for so many aspects of our lives. Our productivity, performance at work,
Right.
the depth and quality of our interpersonal relationships. Are we really listening? Are we present?
Yeah.
And our ability to engage in meaningful learning and personal growth. Difficulties with attention can manifest as challenges in completing tasks, staying focused during conversations, absorbing new information. It affects everything.
Definitely. And on a wider societal level, you mentioned concerns about shorter attention spans?
Yes, there are growing concerns, often linked to the rise of digital technologies and the constant stimulation of the online world. Many observers see a trend towards shorter attention spans, or at least a reduced tolerance for sustained, deep focus compared to, say, a few decades ago.
And what are the potential consequences of that societally?
Well, it could have significant implications for our collective ability to engage with complex societal issues that require deep thought and nuanced understanding. Climate change, political complexities. These aren't things you grasp in a soundbite.
Right. They require sustained attention.
Exactly. It could impact participation in thoughtful discourse, maybe make populations more susceptible to simplistic or emotionally charged messaging, and potentially contribute to increased levels of stress and cognitive overload, just feeling overwhelmed by the constant barrage.
And you mentioned the concept of the attention economy before. What exactly does that entail?
The attention economy refers to our current environment, where human attention itself is seen as a finite, scarce, and therefore increasingly valuable resource.
Attention as currency.
Pretty much, it's actively sought after, captured, and monetized, particularly by technology companies, media organizations, advertisers. This intense competition for our attention raises a number of really important ethical considerations.
Like what?
Concerns about the potential for manipulation designing platforms to hook us. The erosion of our autonomy. Are we really choosing where to direct our mental energy? The potential impacts on our overall well-being, anxiety, comparison, etc. And the concentration of influence in the hands of those who control the platforms and algorithms that mediate what we see.
Right. The algorithms deciding what gets our attention.
Exactly. The constant barrage of information, the design of many digital platforms explicitly engineered to maximize engagement time. It can lead to fragmented attention, make deep thinking harder, and potentially hinder our ability to make well-informed decisions.
So our individual ability to focus, or lack thereof, has these massive ripple effects. It shapes not only our personal lives, but also the broader societal, cultural, even economic landscape in this digital age. It really makes you think about the ethical responsibilities involved in deliberately vying for our attention.
Absolutely. Which leads us directly into the next area, the ethical dimensions of managing and capturing this crucial cognitive function.
Okay, let's delve into that now with navigating the moral maze. What are some of the key ethical considerations that arise specifically from the increasing power of technology to capture and direct our attention?
There are numerous ethical concerns, and they're getting more attention themselves, thankfully. They include worries about manipulation through what's called persuasive design features, deliberately intended to keep us scrolling, clicking, engaged, often exploiting psychological vulnerabilities.
Like infinite scroll or autoplay video.
Exactly. Then there's the relentless stream of notifications, constantly interrupting our focus, pulling us back to the device. Algorithmic curation of content is another big one. It can create filter bubbles or echo chambers, limiting our exposure to diverse perspectives without us even realizing it.
We only see what the algorithm thinks we want to see.
Right. Then there's the potentially addictive nature of some digital platforms, designed to trigger dopamine loops. The rapid spread of misinformation and disinformation, often because sensational or false content, is highly attention-grabbing.
Clickbait, basically.
Often, yes. And underlying much of this are potential algorithmic biases. The algorithms deciding what gets amplified and receives our collective attention can inadvertently perpetuate or even amplify existing societal biases, leading to unfair or discriminatory outcomes.
It really feels like we're constantly being nudged, pulled, sometimes even hijacked in different directions, often without our full awareness or consent.
That's a good way to put it. And this has led to serious discussions about the potential need for a right to attention.
A right to attention, what would that mean?
It's the idea that individuals should perhaps have a fundamental right to control their own attentional resources, to exercise cognitive liberty, and be protected from unwanted, excessive, or manipulative intrusions on their focus.
Interesting. How does that fit with other rights?
Well, it aligns with broader ethical frameworks that emphasize individual autonomy, self-determination, freedom of thought. From this perspective, the deliberate, large-scale manipulation of attention for profit could be seen as an infringement on these fundamental rights.
Are there other ethical viewpoints?
Sure. Utilitarian approaches try to weigh the benefits of these technologies, connection, information access, against the potential harms to individual and collective well-being. But overall, there's a growing recognition of the need for robust ethical guidelines, maybe even regulatory frameworks, to govern the design and deployment of these powerful attention-grabbing technologies.
Especially given the inherent tension, right, between the profit motives of many tech companies and the actual well-being of their users.
That tension is absolutely central to the debate. Finding a way to harness the benefits of technology while safeguarding our cognitive autonomy, our focus, and our well-being is arguably one of the defining challenges of our time.
It really is. Okay, finally, let's looking ahead. What about the evolving role of artificial intelligence? How is AI being used to understand or maybe even influence human concentration?
AI is involved in a couple of ways. First, AI itself uses concepts inspired by human attention, particularly in large language models, like the ones generating human-like text.
GPT and others.
Right. They use sophisticated attention mechanisms. No. These allow the AI to process vast amounts of data and assign weights of importance to different parts, focusing in a sense on the most relevant words or concepts when generating a response or translating text. It loosely mirrors human selective attention.
Loosely mirrors, so it's not the same thing.
Critically important distinction.
Yeah.
No, it's not the same. It's crucial to recognize the fundamental differences. AI attention operates based on computational power, algorithms, and patterns learned from massive data sets. It lacks the subjective experience, the emotions, the consciousness, the genuine understanding of truth or meaning that characterize human focus. It's a powerful tool for pattern matching, not conscious awareness.
Okay, that's a vital clarification. AI attention is an analogy, not the real deal. But how might AI be used to actually help us, humans, improve our own ability to concentrate?
Well, there's definitely potential there. AI could, for instance, analyze our digital usage patterns to help us identify our personal distraction triggers and suggest ways to minimize them.
Like a personalized focus coach.
Could be. AI-powered personal assistants might manage our schedules and reminders more effectively, freeing up our cognitive resources for the actual focused work. Personalized learning platforms could adapt content delivery and pacing based on our individual attentional strengths and weaknesses.
Tailoring education to how we focus best.
Potentially. And in human-AI interactions, maybe we'll see tools that adapt how information is presented to fit our optimal windows of attention, or even provide subtle, real-time feedback on our focus levels during a task.
That sounds quite promising, actually. Like AI could become a tool to help us reclaim some control in this distracting world, but are there potential downsides, risks?
Oh, yes. There are legitimate concerns. One is about cognitive offloading.
Offloading, like outsourcing our thinking.
Kind of. Becoming overly reliant on AI for tasks that require focus, memory, or critical thinking could potentially hinder the development and maintenance of our own cognitive abilities in the long run. If the AI always finds the information or summarizes the text for us, do we lose the ability to do it ourselves?
That's a serious concern. We could become mentally lazy.
It's a risk we need to be mindful of. It's crucial to strive for a balanced approach, where AI serves as a tool to augment our attentional capacities, to support us, rather than replacing our own active engagement, effort, and deep thinking.
So it's about finding that sweet spot. Using AI to enhance our focus without diminishing our own innate abilities to concentrate and think critically for ourselves, that makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. The relationship between AI and human concentration is complex, evolving rapidly, and it will require really careful consideration and ethical development moving forward.
Well, this deep dive into the truly multifaceted world of attention has been incredibly illuminating. It's astonishing, really, when you stop to think about it, just how fundamental this seemingly simple ability is. It underpins so much of our experience, from the intricate workings of neurotransmitters in our brains right up to the broad strokes of cultural patterns and the narratives of
It
history.
connects everything.
It really does. And as we navigate an increasingly complex and, let's face it, technologically saturated world, understanding the nuances of our own attention and the forces that are constantly shaping it feels more critical than ever before.
Absolutely. And I think, especially in the face of these rapid technological advancements, the rise of AI, it's worth remembering the unique qualities of human attention, our consciousness, our emotions, our capacity for subjective understanding and meaning. That's something algorithms don't have.
That's a crucial point. So maybe as you, our listener, go about your day after hearing this, perhaps take a moment to just reflect. Reflect on your own attentional habits. What captures your focus? What helps you truly concentrate?
Yeah, what pulls you away?
Right. And in a world that is constantly, relentlessly vying for your attention, how are you consciously choosing to direct your own mental spotlight? Because ultimately, that choice to intentionally direct our attention, it feels like such a fundamental aspect of what it means to be human, essential not only for navigating the complexities out there, but maybe even more so for the deeper work of understanding ourselves.
This is DigitView.